What it do, y'all? This is probably something I should write down, but I wanted to speak on it while it's on my mind. Um, I've been spending a lot more time thinking about my mixed race background. I'm actually learning a lot about Haitian history right now, which is amazing. I love history, and I've never actually taken the time to personally take a deep dive into Haitian history. It's very fascinating to see. It's just very fascinating to learn about blackness in a different way too. I feel like a lot of the time when we think about blackness, we're talking about an American context. But blackness exists outside of America, and anti-blackness exists outside of America as well. And the forms that they take can be so interesting, especially when they're in countries like, I think about in over the African continent, in different countries, like they got different things going on. In Haiti itself, they got different things going on, and how anti-blackness and anti-darkness really plays a big role in these things. And something that I'm just noticing a lot of when as I identify spaces into which I can speak about being mixed, there's not a lot of spaces for that unless you're talking to other mixed people. Because I've noticed that people don't want to hear shit about people who are mixed, right? It's like, you don't know nothing about struggle because you have a privilege of being mixed. And I'm like, light skin privilege is a real thing, for sure. And the exoticism that comes with being mixed is, I guess, a privilege. I say I guess because, like, knowing that people want to fuck me because I'm Asian and black doesn't feel great. But, you know, it's not the same, right? It's not about comparing struggles. And I think what's challenging is when we are all crabs in a bucket with pain that is not validated, it's very hard to let anybody else have pain and to validate other people's pain too. I think it's time and place, right? Like, if somebody as a dark-skinned black person is sharing their experience of racism and anti-blackness in their life, and for somebody then to come in like, well, as a mixed person, I've also experienced, that's stupid shit. Stop with that. That don't make no damn sense. Like, what are we talking about here? This makes no sense. It makes me think of when people bring up black on black crime when we're talking about police killing black people. Like, what are we talking about here? This makes no sense, right? And I think still, in terms of that example, it's important to talk about that. Outside of, I just don't like when it's brought up as a point to, like, deter from the main point, right? So if we're here talking about police brutality, don't come in here talking about this other shit. Why are we talking about that? You're literally distracting from the point and trying to make it what? I have no clue what you're trying to do with that. That's stupid. However, outside of the conversation of police brutality, can we talk about when black people kill each other? I also hate this term black on black crime, but can we talk about black people killing each other? I have been in spaces where I've seen black people fighting each other, like with the viciousness to tear each other apart. Students. I broke up a fight, like dead ass. I was in the middle of a fight, almost got my shit knocked out because kids, sixth graders were ripping each other's hair out. Right? So there has to be a conversation about that. It does not need to be in the same conversation about police brutality, and it still needs to be a conversation that is had separately. And so when I think about being mixed, there's no space that I really know of to speak about my experiences. And it's just interesting how anytime I bring up anything, it's like, well, that makes you less black. Like, you don't actually even know what it's like to be black because you're Asian. I'm like, but when I'm in Asia, I know a lot of what it's like to be black. And it sucks. Yeah. And then when I go, and then people be like, oh, but you know, you get treated preferentially in black communities. And I'm like, my nickname was Chingling growing up. I was asked to not speak Mandarin in front of people. Like, it's not the same level of violence, and it sucks. And who's playing this comparison game? Because it sounds like y'all playing the comparison game. I was not comparing anything. I was trying to say that this is nuanced. This specific thing is coming from, I saw this person had posted a tweet from an Asian American who was like, you know, those of y'all who was mad supportive of BLM, where y'all at when Asian people get in? And I'm like, see, That's strange. Why are you doing that? I get what you're saying. Like, because I'm a person who likes to listen. I like to listen to the pain underneath people's anger because it's usually what's going on. And so what I hear underneath that is like, we need support. And where is the support? And also, you didn't have to say it that way at all. At all. Because now you're actually defeating your point. Because the same people you trying to ask for support from, you talking shit about them. Why the fuck would they help you? So that part. But then what I made the comment of on this post was like, it's just really interesting witnessing these like non-black POC and black people talking about each other, because I've also seen, a lot of black people being like, where y'all all at, non-black POC, y'all not showing up for us. And it's like, it's just funny to hear the same exact language directed at each other, yet one is more valid than the other. It's like we're fighting for validity. And I guess I keep thinking about crabs in a bucket. When our pain is not validated, it's nearly impossible to validate other people's. Like, you can't even stand hearing about somebody else's suffering. How dare you? I've suffered more. And I just feel like that's so fucked up, because suffering is suffering. Yes, there's degrees. There's degrees of suffering. And also, there's suffering. There's harm. Like, I think about, I don't know, something I'm thinking about right now is my mom. My mom has had a really violent upbringing, really violent past. And for her, hearing that I was experiencing pain or that I experienced violence by her hands, she was like, at first was like, what are you talking about? I didn't get kicked down the steps, right? I didn't get thrown out of windows and beaten till I like had marks on me often. So for her to fathom that I had violence is a lot for her. And it doesn't change the fact that I experienced violence and it hurt me. And I was traumatized by her actions. And I'm not, and it's funny because I've never been like, my pain hurts more than your pain. Or like, because I've had this, your pain suddenly doesn't matter. I'm also hurt. Because of your pain, actually, I have been hurt too. And so the issue here is not pointing at fingers at like who hurt the most and who gets to talk about being hurt. It's like, how do we actually address the hurt and hold space for that to be just had, to just talk about the fucking harm. And they're really, again, it's just a really fickle place. I have no clue where to go with that kind of shit, to be honest. Really, I just got to talk to other mixed people, like I said, because talking to black people is not an option. And it's just like funny when they're like, again, y'all mixed people get privileges and preferential treatment. I'm like what? Like not being able to talk about being black without being constantly like, y'all don't feel no pain because you've been blessed. It just seems like it's just very, very confusing for me. So that's been on my heart and on my mind. And I don't really even know. I'm just sharing because it's how I feel. I just feel like there's no space for people to talk about hurt and to talk about pain without it becoming a comparison game, without it being like, oh, and without people talking about their pain also as a way to invalidate other people's pain. Like, it's all very, very confusing. Yeah. And I think we just need, I just feel like we need, I don't know, spaces to be able to share into without all this reaction. I'm curious what that looks like. Because I feel like there's often blame when we're talking about that. In that woman's original tweet, there's blame. Like, y'all not showing up for us. And like, how do we talk about that without blaming people? How do we talk about how we want more support and need more support without dragging the other people that we're trying to ask for support from? Does that make sense? That's what I got on my heart today.